everyone, this is Alan. I'm one of the pitmasters here at Old 300 BBQ. We realize that we have been shipping briskets out for a while, and they come with cooking instructions, but they don't come with how to cut it instructions. So we're doing this little video to kind of inform you on the ways to cut a brisket. First off, I'd like to say thank you very much for your order of the brisket. Whether you got it through Goldbelly, through us, through a friend, however you got it, we really appreciate the fact that you have one of our briskets. So what we have here is I have put together two pieces of a brisket to simulate a whole one, because you're either going to get a brisket that looks like this, you're going to get a piece of brisket that looks like this, or a piece of brisket that looks like this, depending upon what you order and what we're able to ship to you. So I'm going to move this guy aside for a minute. And we're going to start on this piece of brisket. This is commonly referred to as the flat or the lean end of the brisket. That's not totally true, which I'll show you here in a little while. But here's what we're looking for. We are looking for, if I flip this brisket over, it's kind of hard to see the grain of the brisket. It's there. The easiest thing to do is to find a corner, pick any corner. I try to pick this point here though, and just slice that first layer of fat off. You'll immediately see the direction that the grain of the brisket is going. If you cut this brisket like this, you're going to wind up with a very tough piece of meat. What you always want to do with the brisket is slice it across the grain. So you're just going to go down and you're going to continue slicing back until you have this little piece of brisket cut up. And what you're going to wind up with is a very, I don't want to say lean, but a very nice looking piece of meat out of this end of the brisket. Every bit of this is good. If you want to trim this fat layer after you get it on your plate, I don't recommend trimming it until you get it on your plate. So that's pretty basically how to slice this whole thing. I will show you one little trick. When you're serving any of the brisket, you'll see that this looks very, very nice. For presentation wise, it looks very nice. But if you simply flip that brisket over and get kind of our burn end, the presentation on it is much, much better. It looks to me like a better cut of meat. And that's pretty much it on this end of the brisket. So we will go to the big one now. I'm going to move all of this stuff out of our way. And we will move on to the cap end of the brisket. Now the thing about this, you noticed when they were together that you could kind of tell what was what. Sometimes when you get this, it's a little bit hard to tell. What I always tell people to do is look for the sliced side of the brisket. And what you're going to want to do is cut off just enough of that slice so that we can see where the fat line is in this brisket. And you can notice that I just took my knife and barely ran it over there. So what you want to do is just slice that fat off. You're going to wind up with two separate pieces of brisket on this. You'll notice that this is just like the first piece that we cut. You want to basically do the same thing. Find out which way the grain is going. There's the grain. Slice it up. And again, you wind up, that's a little thick slice. But again, you wind up with a very nice looking piece of meat. Again, you can trim the fat off however you want. I really don't recommend trimming too much of the fat off of this piece of brisket right here. It's a pretty good cut. But let's work on this top cap. And it is a little bit different. Move everything out of the way one more time. This top cap is actually going, it's the other muscle on the brisket. The grain actually runs counter to the way that the grain ran on the first one. So what I always do is, first thing I always do is slice it in half. When you slice it in half, you open up the brisket and winds up looking like this. And that does a couple of things. The first thing that it does is it lets me trim all of the fat off of it. So I'm going to take my knife and just slowly trim the fat portion off of this brisket. And then again, you can see the grain, which way the grain is running. When you have it up like this, slice it against the grain again. We trim the fat, and we're just going to start slicing it against the grain. And again, you're going to wind up with a very lean, what I consider a very lean piece of meat. This portion of the brisket right here is actually my favorite. To me, it's the easiest to chew, the easiest, and it has the most flavor. So that's pretty basically on Brisket 101. You know, I cut this one in half. You do the same thing on this side. You find the fat again. You don't have to trim it overly off, but just trim the fat off. And this just goes straight in the trash, and this just gets cut up. And you wind up with some very good looking chunks of meat again. And so really, no matter which portion of the brisket you get, while this end's a little fatter, has a little bit more fat on it, it's still not an unlean cut of meat, depending upon how you slice it. So that's basically how to slice a brisket 101. I'd like to say thank you again for your purchase of the brisket. If you need to get in touch with us, we include all kinds of instructions on how to get. There's phone numbers. My business card is in there. Just give us a holler. We'd love to talk to you about briskets.